Hey friends, welcome back to another realistic garden tour. Full disclosure, I have not cleaned up my garden. I haven't weeded. I haven't done anything to make this look aesthetic. This is just a day in the life, keeping up with a garden and a newborn and all of the things. So come with me. Join me as I walk through the garden tonight. So this is our tomato bed. We have 50 plants in here, and as you can see, I've got some basil on the understory there. I need to go ahead and sow some more radish seeds in there as well. I've got a variety of tomatoes here, and no, I don't have them all marked out because kids. So I have a variety of slicers and plum tomatoes as well as cherry tomatoes in here. As you can see, we are very heavy-handed with the pruning. We prune everything from the flower or the fruit down. So the first foot or two of these plants is bare. And that's how we get so many packed into one bed, because we prune them very heavily so they're not overcrowding each other and spreading diseases easily and things like that. I will say this trellis is working phenomenally compared to the lower and lean trellis we used to have. A huge benefit of this trellis is that the green hornworm population is being managed by the birds. The birds never really hung around the lower and lean trellis that we used to have because it's like, you know, a poly wire. It's not very sturdy. This trellis they love hanging around on, and they are keeping that population down for us. And green hornworms are always such a hassle, especially when you want to stay away from chemicals. So I am loving where we're at with these tomatoes. Super healthy. I don't see any signs of diseases or the hornworms. So those have been wonderful. So moving on, we have a very sad looking cucumber bed. I had to replant this entire bed about 6 weeks ago, I believe. So they are just now getting up and going. So unfortunately, we don't have an early crop of cucumbers to start canning, but we'll still have a later crop. So I'm guessing by late July, I will be able to start canning up some pickles. So moving on, we have a potato bed. These are all Kennebec varieties. Actually, I think there is some red variety in here. What I love about the Kennebec variety is that you don't have to mound up the potatoes like other varieties. The least amount of work, the better. And I need to pull these up. They are ready to go. You can see that there's actually some potatoes on the surface of the bed there. So once I pull these up, I am going to plant some cool crops in here like kale and cabbages and things of that nature. And at the end of this bed, I have some self-seeded Armenian cucumber here. So I've just put up a little cattle panel portion just to kind of help it climb upwards. It doesn't have any fruit on it yet, but it's got plenty of flowers. The bees are all around to help pollinate them and get those going. So that'll be a nice little boon to have in the garden. Okay, so I've got a little border of sunflowers. They have not come into bloom yet. They will here in the next couple of weeks. I always love having sunflowers, and I've got dozens of volunteer sunflowers throughout the summer garden and the perennial garden. I love them. They're wonderful to have. And we've got our peppers here. Again, I've got a variety of bell peppers, banana peppers, and jalapeno peppers. That's my preference. I don't like to plant too many varieties. I have a very, very specific use for each of these. The banana peppers I will be eating fresh as well as canning. The bell peppers mainly fresh, and the banana peppers and the jalapenos will be preserved, either dried and pulverized into like a jalapeno powder that I can throw into dishes for some spice, or just to can and have as like a pickled pepper. So you can see they're coming along pretty nicely. And I want to also mention that you will see a lot of weeds in my garden, and I am not one to fight weeds that come up because honestly, so many weeds are beneficial. They feed pollinators, they provide a home for beneficial insects, they help break up compacted soil, and at the very least, they prevent erosion, right? Instead of having bare soil being open to the sun and the wind and the rain. Weeds are the lazy man's cover crop. That's what I'm telling myself right now. I've got some Trumpicino squash, which is really nice. It's like a cross between a butternut squash and a zucchini. I highly recommend you give that one a try. This was our first year growing it, and I'm loving it so far. We've got a just regular yellow and green zucchini squash, as well as crooked neck squash. We do have some squash bugs going in there. We always get them around this time. That's just to be expected. Unfortunately, it's like no matter what I do, we get them. So we have a pretty short window with squash here until we start a new batch of squash. So I'm just not too concerned with them at this point. We're getting plenty of squash for our family right now. These are some extra cucumbers that I have going here. They've got some fruit on there. Again, the fruit is still about an inch in length. So they've got another probably week or two before I can start harvesting off of these. These are the Citadel and the Armenian cucumbers. They're both intertwined together. I've got some purple pole beans, which have done really great. I've got almost a dozen or so that we've been picking off here fresh. I have just done some fresh pickled pole beans so far. I don't plan on canning these. I plan on just using them in stir fries or just as like a fresh pickled green bean to snack on and munch on. And those actually stay good in the fridge for up to a month. So that's a little tip. If you don't have that much to harvest to worry about canning, you can just fresh pickle them. You can see some of these Japanese beetles have been getting to them, but overall they look pretty healthy despite the pest. So the Japanese green beetles can be devastating to a gardener, especially again if you're trying to stay organic like we do. And this year, for whatever reason, they're just not as bad of an issue. I've got some celery interspersed throughout the garden too. It was my first time growing celery. It is so finicky trying to germinate these seeds. The seed packet actually said 75% seed germination rate, and I got about a 50% germination rate, if that tells you anything. Again, more weeds, but the bees are loving it, so I'm leaving them there. These are the Chinese yard long beans, which initially I didn't think were really going to take off, and of course now they have. They look so great, and I've planted a whole row of these, so 20 of these plants, and I plan on canning these. So you can see what they look like. They're just starting to really get going. They get much bigger than this, so we're excited to see how much we will get out of these plants. Like I said, I've got quite a bit here, so I am planning on having a nice full batch of canning projects with those beans. This was just some experimental cabbages I had in the pods to see how they would do for this weather this time of year. And as I suspected, they're not really doing that great, but honestly, I'm surprised that this one's even formed a head. We've had 90-degree weather here. Of course, the pests are going crazy at it, which is interesting because I have cabbages in the ground and I never have them destroyed by the pests like these have been. So that's interesting. Just saying hello to some of these American breast chickens that we need to go ahead and butcher here shortly. And these are those Japanese beetles. So like I said, they're there. They love the raspberries. They're there, but they're not as bad as they were last year. So that's great. My perennial garden is swarming with weeds and herbs and berries and all sorts of things just intermingled together. And like I was saying, the weeds can be your friend. I am not one to stress about making my garden look aesthetic. That's nice to look at, but is it functional? That's my main goal here. And so if we've got some weeds there, I am not concerned. Even the grass, the perennial grasses, I'm not too concerned. We've got some garlic here that, again, garlic and onions that will be harvested here shortly. I just wanted to take a peek and see how some of this garlic was doing. And full disclosure, y'all, this garlic was just taken from the Costco, that big Costco bag of garlic that you buy in the produce section. That's what I planted in this garden. I was just curious. Again, more experimenting, and honestly, it turned out great. And one of my goals that I have every year is to focus on wildflowers, to sowing more and more wildflowers and saving those seeds. Because if you haven't noticed, wildflower seeds are actually kind of expensive, especially things like crimson clover, which is a great cover crop and one that I like to sow around the garden, not just for the pollinators or for the soil, but again, to save seeds to sow into a field. My hopes is that the wildflower field that we have going can be more and more densely populated with these wildflowers. So I like to keep my flowers on, the flower heads on, until they're dry as bone, like they're just like crinkly dry, and I just snip the whole head off and I put them in a paper bag and I just leave them there open until they're completely dry. And I do this for all of the wildflowers. That way next year, the following year, I spread them around and I get just exponentially more seeds every year. Thank you so much for joining me for that. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope that your garden is thriving. I'll see you guys next time.